for a child that's, say, and I'm sure you've got this question a bit, that's really young, that hasn't had a long time to be in the environment, say that they're 2 or something like that, and they develop an illness.
Yes.
How would people then say, well, it couldn't have been their environment, they are so young, like they weren't 30 years down the track and beaten and, all that kind of stuff?
They grew up in an environment. They were created embryologically in an environment. And I go, what do you mean? I say, well, they came with their own genes, right? Mm. But they're nourished by the mother's blood. And when I was teaching in medical school 50 years ago or so, we said, what's the role of the mother? Oh, she eats well, takes vitamins, supplements, does exercise, and that's to make a good mother. But the new science of epigenetics is the science how environment is controlling the genes.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you look at the blood and go, there's more than nutrition in this blood. There are emotional chemicals, there are growth factors, hormones, and all these things. So whatever the mother is experiencing in her life, when the baby is growing inside of her, not only is she sending blood nutrition to the baby, she's giving the baby information about her life. And if she's struggling, then the baby doesn't know why she's struggling, but the baby will know life is not easy, life is a struggle. And that changes the genetics of the baby completely. And the relevance is that, the baby's already being genetically altered by the mother who doesn't even know that her consciousness and how she's feeling, and this relates then, of course, to the father, because if he irritates the mother, then she's not feeling well. I say, but the fetus is just getting the information. Is the environment safe or not safe? Generally, if there's all kinds of turmoil. So that's number one. But let me also say this. As we talked about, we come into this life with karma, okay? And we've been here many, many times because the television bodies come and go, but the broadcast is always here. I say, but how many lives do we have? 1,000 lives. I go, so what's significance? Sometimes a child is born with a defect of some kind, autism or some kind of thing like that, something. And I say, oh, poor child. I go, this child has altered the behavior of the parents and the community. And that then maybe a child comes in as a teacher.
Yes.
And I just said yesterday at this Awaken Festival, I met somebody who child is autistic, and guess what? Their lives have completely changed. They're now working in a community group. They're working, trying to make a better environment and all that. And they got that from what? Because their child is in the situation and they want to know how to overcome it. And so they have a completely different life experience after this. And it changed their environment and the people around them. The child was teaching.
Teacher. It's so funny you say this. A friend of mine was telling me a story about how someone she knows, their child got leukemia and was really sick in hospital for a couple of years, and the parents work nonstop. And so during that time, they stopped being workaholics and spent time at the bedside in the children's hospital with their child. As soon as that child became well after 2 years, bang, back to workaholics. And it's like, that's a lesson. That child was teaching you to give it time and love and not work your, 24/7 and neglect it. And now the child has nannies and, it's kind of quite sad.
It is very sad. It's really interesting because I didn't believe in spirituality as a scientist, and the day that I started to recognize the physical mechanism, quantum physics and cells and putting it together, and there was this moment, I said, oh my God, I wasn't spiritual. And it's like, oh my God, I'm not in here. I'm the field. And so I went from a whole life not spiritual, and then 1 minute later, it was like, oh, I'm spiritual. It's like, whoa. It wasn't like I acquired devotion.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, my God. And this was a moment where, as a scientist, I said to myself, wait a minute. I'm a spiritual entity, and I have a body. And curious science guy says to himself, I say to myself, why have a body and a spirit? Why not just be a spirit? And the answer to my question welled up from 50 trillion cells in my body, and I refer to them now as Jewish comedian cells. And I say that because I asked a question, why have both? Why have a body and a spirit? Why not just be a spirit? And the 50 trillion cells welled up and asked me a question. I asked a question, they answered with a question. The question they asked me is, Bruce, if you're just a spirit, what does chocolate taste like? And that's it's so deep that you have to sit back and think about that. And the idea was what? I only know what chocolate tastes like because I have a body that, takes the chemistry of chocolate and turns it into a vibration energy. The brain takes all the things from the outside and turns it into a vibration that's sent back to source. So I said, what's love? I said, well, you can write an essay about love, but you won't know what love is until you have a body and the chemistry of love. And then all of a sudden, oh my God, that's a physical thing. I can see, that's a different thing. What does a beautiful scene look like? Well, you got to have some eyes and the music. Well, you got to have some ears. And all of a sudden I say, oh my God, we came here to enhance our experience. You can be a spirit, but if you have no experience, then it's like, oh, what does a sunset look like? You go, what the hell is a sunset? And all of a sudden you start to realize we came here to manifest experiences. And the idea which people don't recognize is, well, if you have a negative experience, then don't do that again. And if you have a positive experience, hey, do that one again because that was great. And that was what I realized. What a joy it is when you came here to understand, you came here to manifest life experiences.